BL, welcome to the Z Learning Podcast. I'm so grateful you're here today. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Thanks for having me.
My pleasure. So before we get into talking tactically and practically about social media marketing and trends, I want to talk a little bit about you and your background. You've been in the marketing game for a long time. In fact, I'd call you an OG marketer.
What's that?
Original gangsta marketer. You've been around. You've been around the block.
I'm an old timer.
Yeah. So how did you get into marketing and particularly digital marketing?
Well, before 1995, I owned my own PR firm, which I grew into one of the top 10 independent PR firms in the country. And I had wonderful clients. And then I saw the internet, was totally seduced by it. And none of my clients were interested. And I was working with Miracle Grow. I was working with the American Dairy Association. I was working with big name brands. And nobody wanted to do it. So I tried to sell my firm and nobody put real money on the table. And anybody who did wanted me to stay. And I wanted to be gone. So I respectfully resigned my business and just started basically, looking at the internet and looking at what people were doing. And at that time, which was like 1994, 1995, you could call up anybody. You could say, can I come see what you're doing? Will you show me? Will you teach me? Will you, talk to me? And everybody would. And then I started writing about what I thought the impact was going to be on marketing. And at that time, there were all these daily internet publications, Internet Day and many others, and they were paying $1.50 a word. So it was well worth your time to write for them. And they all went bankrupt. But as a result of writing about the impact I thought the internet would have on marketing, I heard from Ford, I heard from IBM. And so a business just came. And, there've been lots of ups and downs since then, but I've been doing this ever since. And the key to the whole thing is to just keep learning.
I think you said it right there. Keep learning and adapting. That's something us marketers always need to be doing. It's a rapidly changing industry. So, you've watched the industry. You started out in traditional PR and you made that adjustment. You adapted to the internet and you got into digital marketing. You've watched the marketing advertising industry be massively disrupted by technology, completely changed over the past 30 years. And it's still changing all the time. Just the past few years, we've seen some major platforms decline in influence or go out of business altogether. We've witnessed newer platforms emerge like Clubhouse and TikTok and completely dominate the culture. So we're always having to adapt. What are some of the most noteworthy changes you've seen in just the past 5 years?
It's absolutely got to do with video. Right now, incorporating video is like having a website in 2000. Google owns YouTube. It's the second largest search engine. And if you know how to properly optimize your videos, Google very much favors them in search. And so I think that any marketing program that doesn't include video at this point is not going to be successful.
Awesome. That's a perfect segue to my next question. Should every business owner have a podcast in 2021? Should every business owner or marketer have a YouTube channel?
No. You should only have a podcast if you have a reason to. There's, I don't know the current number and how many gazillions of podcasts there are, but there are an awful lot of them. And very few of them have an actual audience. And, you do this every week and you've had some really interesting guests on yours, but a lot of people just use it as a platform to talk and, basically who cares? And so no, you should only have a podcast if you really have something to add that isn't already being said by 40,000 other people. And should everybody have video? Probably yes. The answer to that is probably yes. Should you have a YouTube channel? Maybe. It depends. I mean, it really depends. I'm working right now with a financial firm, and they absolutely have a video capacity. And what's important is not to have scripted videos where you're reading and, this whole formal thing. And for God's sake, don't have that awful music in the background, like it's horrible. But I think every business owner knows the 10 questions that they're asked on a daily basis. Use the video for FAQs, use the video to humanize your business. But if you're going to have a YouTube channel, it's like having a blog. You have to update it. It's like having a podcast. You have to have consistency. So on YouTube, if you're going to have a YouTube channel, you really need to post at least once a week. And most of the successful YouTube channels post more often than that. But maybe 1 in 1,000 knows how to optimize their videos so anybody will ever see them. So it's a very complicated thing. You can't just have video or do a podcast. You got to know what you're doing.
That's a great point. And I guess there are 2 questions I just thought of from that. One would be, what do you tell? You said you should add something new to the conversation. You shouldn't have, you shouldn't be creating content about things that people have already, that's just adding to the noise or that people have already said. So what do you tell a business that says, well, I don't know if we have anything new to say. Everybody has already said everything already before. What would you tell someone who says that? And 2, maybe after that, you could go a little bit into the difference between content creation, which I think everybody understands, and content distribution, optimization, because you could create the best content, right? It doesn't guarantee everyone's gonna see it.
Well, that comes down to marketing. But to answer your first question, the first thing I would tell them was, let's take a look at what you have, who you're trying to reach, how you're currently reaching them. Let's create a marketing strategy and see whether a podcast fits into it. And in order to create a marketing strategy at this point in time, you really need to be data-based. And so I am at this very moment suffering through an extremely deep dive into SEM Rush, which has 40 tools, and each one of them will take you down a rabbit hole of information that you could spend your life in. So the conclusion I've drawn about that is that all 40 tools are really not necessary. There's probably 5 that are, but first let's look at what you're trying to do. And before, I have clients all the time who say, oh, we want a podcast. I'm like, you really be better off being a guest on someone else's podcast rather than doing your own. So it's really a matter of who you're trying to reach, what's working for you now, what your message is, who, if the people you're trying to reach are even people who listen to podcasts. Not everybody does. Most people do these days, but not everybody does.
Right, for sure. And I guess, using your PR background, it's interesting how that industry has changed as well. A lot of it now is tied with SEO, getting your website to rank for keywords by getting mentioned or featured on popular news sites. But now it's also all, I think, PR agencies and marketing agencies, which are, it seems like everything's kind of coming together. There's a lot of blurred lines, but a lot of it is now also about having a strategy for getting mentioned by influencers, getting guest appearances on podcasts. All of that can help build your brand, expose you to new audiences, build your brand awareness, and also, I think, get you some third-party credibility.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So
the thing that's hard for, and always probably will be hard for companies to understand, is that you can't just tell, Seth Godin said it in one sentence. He said, you can't just tell people what you want to tell them, you have to tell them what they want to hear. And so what I tell clients is the rule of social media is 11 to 1. 11 times you engage with other people, 11 times you retweet or you repost other people's content, you comment on people's content, you compliment them, and one time you talk about yourself, and that, that's what works. And for example, whenever I post an article that I think people will be interested in, I always include the name of the author. I can't tell you how few people do that. And when you do that, the author sees it, and the journalist then generally either likes it or responds to it or follows you back.
Yeah, that's interesting. Just personal anecdote. I saw that you've written for Contently, which is a great blog. I've followed them over the years, and I once, on my own blog, I've mentioned once an article from there, and I cited sometimes if the author has a Twitter handle or something, I'll include it. And I've gotten nice responses from that.
Totally. Yeah,
Yeah,
totally. Same thing on LinkedIn. I mean, when people post things and they don't credit the creator or the author of them, I think they're making a big mistake. And
totally.
I can't, I mean, if I had a nickel for every time somebody said, well, I don't want to give away all my secrets, and my answer to them is always the same. The more you give, the more you get. You're not going to give away all your secrets. You're going to, people can't come to do business with you until they know you're there, and until they know what you have expertise in. And the way you do that is you show it, you demonstrate it. So there's so many people who are afraid that that was yesterday's important stuff. There's new important stuff today. I mean, you're never going to run out of new things to learn and to engage with. And so that is a bogus worry.
Yeah. So it's interesting, I also love when I get tagged, and I appreciate that a lot, like on LinkedIn and other
Sure.
platforms, and someone shares my writing or something like that. I think that builds goodwill. And you brought up another very important point, and I've been told by certain people, they're usually of a certain age, like maybe my grandparents or something, like, who will say something like, don't you think you give away too much? You shouldn't give away so many of your secrets, or you shouldn't. And tell me if you agree with this. I mean, my answer is that in the internet, in today's world with the internet, everything's open. Everyone knows about everything, and anything you want, it's at your fingertips. You can find out about it. You can't give everything away, and like you said, you've got to show it. One of my, actually a past guest on this podcast, Jen Gittimer, she says, "Show, don't tell. Help, don't sell." Which I believe is very important,
I
because
agree.
how would anyone know that you exist, and how would anyone get to know you, like you, and trust you, unless you share value with them? That's the currency that I think we as marketers, business people, to trade on today is
It really
content.
is currency. You're
Yeah,
absolutely right. And I say to people, like, okay, if you feel that you have a secret and you're talking about something, and how you do it is what distinguishes you, then talk about what and why. And then if people want to know more, they can get in touch with you. I mean, you're obviously never going to give away absolutely everything you know,
right.
but you have to share information. You have to bring value to the conversation. That's really all there is to it.
And that's exactly it. People, even though there's so much free content and so much available, your ideal customers, your clients, they don't want to do that themselves. That's what they're hiring you for.
Exactly.
They might start doing it themselves, but they'll run into
They'll muck
maybe
it up.
right, or they'll run into a snag, a setback. They'll need help. Also, people value things. They might want to pay for the information or use your services, because they trust your expertise, and they also appreciate the value of. There's so much noise on the internet. There's so much information, but if you're the one who can help contextualize it, right, and can help them make sense of all this data, they're going to appreciate that. And when they need help, you're going to be much better positioned than your competition, who might
Well, I
silence.
think that in order for you to be well positioned, you really have to have data to back up what you're saying. And that's the place, you can't do it by how you feel. I would have to certainly say early in my career when I was doing PR, a lot of times it was just, like, I think this will work. But now you can really find out. You can test, you can do A/B testing online, you can do all sorts of different things. But one of the things that I tell people is that the most valuable real estate you own on the internet is your email list, the people
Mhm.
who have given you permission to be in touch with them. And you need to find a way to stay in touch with them. So for our podcast, for the Beyond Social Media show, we do a weekly newsletter. And I have fallen down on the job this week, but we generally tweet, up to 10 times a day about what we covered in a given episode. And you need to be constantly staying in touch with the people who've given you permission to do that. And to do that, you can't just talk about yourself there either. You really have to provide them with value. So I think a lot of people overlook the value of newsletters. I think a lot of people overlook the value of, of social media. And it's a big mistake. And it's, it's a lot of work. And that's all there is to it. I mean, all of this is a lot of work. And you have to have systems, you have to organize, you have to find a way to keep all this information flowing and together. And, you need a variety of tools for that. One of the great places for tools is Wonder Tools from Jeremy Kaplan. I mean, he has this wonderful weekly newsletter that I was just reading. And every week he has like fabulous tools. This week he has alternatives to Google Docs, and he has alternative, note keeping information that you can try. And you just have to keep on trying new ways of being organized, and so much of it is being organized. Maybe
Yeah, for
90%.
sure. And that actually brings me to my next question, how you manage to do it all. But before we get into that, I just want to say, yeah, thank you for sharing that. I'm going to definitely check that out. And I love it. And it's not often, and not every guest will shout out, other people or share relevant tools. I appreciate that. And my listeners can find out more social media tips and learn about new platforms and tools that can help them by going to your podcast, the Beyond Social Media podcast. But in addition to running your own marketing consultancy, you manage a popular blog, the What's Next blog. You have the Beyond Social Media podcast, where you discuss social media marketing strategy and all the latest social media trends. And you also have a very prolific and consistent output of content that's nothing short of impressive.
Thank you.
How do you manage to stay on top of it all and ensure everything gets the proper attention it needs to be successful?
I'm not sure I do. I mean, number one is I work a lot, but I also network a lot. I'm on Lunch Club 2 or 3 times a week, where I met you, and I've met an awful lot of wonderful people there and learned a lot from how they stay organized. And it's really, I do have a daily system. I'm on Twitter all the time. I get an awful lot of information on Twitter, and I check. I check Feedly. I check. I have Gmail alerts. I have any number of I do. What is the other one that I do? I have all kinds of sources where I compile, and then I check headlines and see what's worth reading. But I read all day. That's what I do. I read and I listen, and I interact with people all day long. And I do that. When I work with a client, I eventually are so inside their head that I can write as them. And that is such an incredible learning experience to get to that point when you're working with somebody, and where you can comment on an article as them, and you'll be right, that's what they would have said. And that comes from really studying what your clients are saying and doing and what they need. So it's just, you gotta always be learning and reading and listening and all of that.
I think that's the common recurring theme here, to never kind of sit comfortable or give up. You got to always be learning, adapting, following the market trends, and knowing that and staying on top of things, honing your craft, understanding your field.
How do you do it?
Yeah. I think it's a lot of it is it's reading, like you said. There's blogs, podcasts, networking, and talking to experts like you, having people on this podcast. I think I learn a lot from my guests, which is one of the I guess the one of the selfish joys of being able to do a podcast. You get to meet such interesting people and learn from them, and your guests get to learn. I mean, your listeners get to learn as well.
That's true.
And also, I wanted to just go back to one point you made about email, and networking. I mean, networking is so essential, and building that email list. It's such a shame, wouldn't you say, when people spend money to acquire customers, they'll spend money on advertising, they'll get people maybe from social media, and they'll get that transaction or conversion, and then they don't follow up with email, or they meet someone at a networking event and they don't use their email list to, share things of value, stay in touch with them with an email newsletter. It's a shame because, the email, what people don't realize, it's an underrated channel. People think it's dead. I don't open those emails I get from companies, but an email that provides value enables you to stay on people's radar and keep in touch with people for free.
Yeah,
Without,
well, that gets back to adding value,
yeah,
and it is, and you also have to be very sensitive about how often you do it and all of that. But when I do the newsletter for the podcast, I don't just talk about the podcast. I talk about, here's something interesting that we read this week. Here's a tool that we found that you might like. Here's a moment of joy. Here's something just to make you smile. Just something beyond what is obvious, which is what we talked about. So I think that you have to give people a reason. But I also, on the other hand, have to tell you that email is the scourge of my existence. I get 500 is not, I zap 600 a day.
Mhm.
And I subscribe to umpteen emails, and I try to read most of them, and I try to be kind and unsubscribe to the ones I don't read, because that hurts you if people don't open your emails.
Sure.
And but it's the stuff I get, you buy something and then every single freaking day you get something from that store.
Yep.
They go to spam. I didn't give you permission to come to me 5 or 6 times a day.
Right.
Much as I might love you, you can't do that. And I think like people just don't get like the practical aspects of marketing. It's like, well, we want to do this and we want to do, well, will that work? Will people respond to it? And a lot of times you have to kind of stop people and say, wait a minute, like, let's take another look at that. And that's the role I play. I'm the fly in the ointment, I guess.
Yeah, well, I think they forget the human aspect, because we have all this data and quantitative measurement, which is awesome and great, but sometimes people forget, like, would you start a conversation with that kind of random, creepy, long DM? Is that how you would talk to somebody at a networking event? If someone says, yeah, you can email me, 'cause I bought something or I subscribe, would you like being emailed like 10 times a day or whatever?
Right.
It's
You
sort of
have to
common
think that
sense,
way.
right?
Well, it is common sense. And I believe there's a huge lack of common sense
It's not so
in the
common,
world.
right?
I also think like the vast majority of the world needs an editor.
Mhm.
I think that, I mean, you can't just put information out. You have to think about how, first of all, like, how are people going to read it off a screen? Are you sending a blob of type because so many people do? Or are you thinking about white space? And are you thinking about subheads? And are you thinking about, how long it will take somebody to read that? I love when newsletters say, this is a 3-minute read, or this is a 7-minute read. Like, thank you. I appreciate that.
Me too. Exactly. It's also it's appreciating the medium, the context, the mind, the headspace your reader might be in and everyone's different, whether they're on Twitter versus when they're on LinkedIn or Facebook. And then, with email, of course, and sometimes email can get abused, but social media, you always have to measure, like, one person you're talking to might have just liked a post. They might be in a different, not only a different headspace in general, but also a different way of relating to your brand versus a person who opted in willingly into an email list and is getting it in their email, which is like a more of a personal, a little bit more of a personable way of communication. So you always have to be mindful, right? I guess of the platform, the where people are at when they're on these various platforms, and then the context they may have on you and your brand, where they are in the buying cycle. And they need people like you, like me, to help them kind of figure that out and how to respond accordingly.
So how are you feeling about all of the voice platforms that are popping up? Every single platform is starting one. Personally, I think Twitter will win this battle because people already have followings on Twitter, and Twitter already has content. And I think it's pretty clear that Clubhouse is losing traction.
Yeah.
But which one are you liking?
It's funny. It was like 5 years ago, I think. I said, "Oh, wouldn't it be cool if there were comments where you could voice note?" And people said that's weird. That's just gonna be creepy. Like that, like I don't know. And now this is not such a crazy thing. I could see Twitter definitely winning that battle because it's the most one-to-one communication. It's like it really is the most social of the social media platforms, and it's more conversational. It's not long form content. It's not really reading or watching like content. It's more of like a direct communication between people chatting. So I could,
Well, they just announced three new things that they're doing, and what they're basically doing is making Twitter more like Google Plus was,
mhm,
where you will be able to have tweets go to certain segments of your audience, which is a really good idea.
yeah,
And also where they're expanding spaces, and I forget what the third thing is, but the thing about being able to segment your audience is a really interesting one, and they're just starting to test it now. And in the long run, I think that Twitter has been the most innovative of the platforms. There's a lot of things wrong with it, but I mean, spell check would be really nice.
sure,
But
for all
I
of
don't
them.
want an edit button. I do not want an edit button, because that would allow people to change things that they should not be able to change. And
Mm.
people are jumping up and down. We need an edit button. No, you don't. But we do need a spell check.
That, yeah, spell check definitely. That's an interesting point, right? Because you can't edit. So I mean, a lot of people I think don't understand Twitter. You can go on there. It seems sometimes very toxic. It seems outside of celebrities, people who are very interested in politics. There's a certain there are certain demographics that are more into Twitter than others. I think a lot of businesses particular. Although I know many businesses who do get a lot of business on Twitter, I think like for B2B people, usually LinkedIn's the go-to. I think people are afraid of Twitter a little bit unless they're doing bigger company doing customer service. What would you say should be a small or medium-sized business's strategy on Twitter right now in 2021 and beyond? Because it definitely has changed a lot as well. I think people thought it was down for the count a few years ago, and just see how quickly things change. Now we're talking more about Twitter. So,
Well, I think that your strategy has to begin with, as it does on every platform, kind of lurking to get the lay of the land and understanding, what people are talking about and how they're conversing with each other and all of that. But I use a tool called Follower Wonk. And Follower Wonk is very helpful for finding people who are interested in the topics that you're wanting to talk about, and also in learning what their influence is, and we should go back to influencers, but in learning what their credibility is on the platform and how active they are. And you can see all of that in that platform. Again, you need the right tools, to be able. You can't just kind of go on Twitter and figure it out. You need to look around, you need to learn, you need to use a little bit of Twitter lists are remarkable. Following people's lists on Twitter. I keep a lot of them private, but I have a lot of them public. I have a
yeah,
list on NFTs that lots of people follow. I have a list on YouTube resources that people follow. And a lot of people have really, I mean, if you want to find journalists, go look at their Twitter lists and you'll find their colleagues. And many times, if they're open to receiving email, they'll have it on there. And you need to do your studying. You don't just start on any platform. But I believe that LinkedIn and Twitter are the two most important business platforms. And I think most businesses can basically forget about Facebook at this point. To me, it's a toxic waste. I have no interest in it anymore. really I go there to see whose birthday it is, and you know what, my friends and family are posting pictures of their dogs and children. I want to see those, but am I going to get involved in a political discussion on no, I'm not. You know, it's toxic, and they know it. And I just interviewed, I haven't posted it yet, I interviewed Bob Hoffman, who's called the Ad Contrarian, and he was talking about, you know, how Facebook knows what they've done. They've created radicals, they've created political discord, they know that, and they have enough AI that they could stop it. Every one of these platforms has the AI to stop hate speech and all the other things, but it's not part of their economic model to do that.
Yeah, so wow, there's a lot here to unpack, I think, but I would say, you know, going back to Twitter strategy, I think a lot of people, you know, LinkedIn can be a great place to network, a great place to talk, but Twitter can be a great place to do what Dave Kerpen calls social listening, and really a big downfall for a lot of companies, especially marketing and sales. And you can come up with these clever things, but they're a little bit too far removed from the actual customer, and understanding the actual consumer mindset. And Twitter could be a great, fantastic way to be a fly on the wall, get into the conversation, learn about your customers, learn about what's on their minds, what they're talking about, and also a way to understand the culture so that your marketing can break into it more. As far as you're saying with Facebook, so yeah, I would say Facebook and Twitter are probably equally toxic in terms of the, you know, when I look at the feed, Twitter may be the most, and I think they've both definitely been irresponsible, and how they've, in terms of their duty of kind of hosting the conversation, or where we are now. What I would say for Facebook, is that it's an invaluable platform if you're doing advertising. So if you're doing advertising, or if you have a group, a lot of engagement, it's still the largest social media platform with about 2 billion daily active users. So I'd say Facebook combined with Instagram, it's the same company and the same ad product. And since the ads, some of them are not intrusive or interruptive and have so much data, and we can obviously have questions how they get that data, right? But since there is so much data, and you know, I think relatively, I think the value is disproportionately high to the investment. So as an advertising platform, I think it's excellent. And if you're able to create a group with active engagement, it's excellent. If you're just trying to do it organic, it really depends on what your strategy is. Like, groups are great, but as a user, as in my personal life, I agree with you. Facebook feels like a big
Well,
waste
the
of time.
difference to me is that on Twitter, everything is about who you follow and who you allow to follow you. And I don't see content from people who I don't want to see content from. And on Facebook, I don't have that option. I get a lot of crap in the feed that I don't want to see.
Uncle
And
Joe, yeah.
yeah, but no, but I mean ads and you know, political stuff,
Yeah,
so you're absolutely right in terms of advertising. It's very targeted, but I don't believe it's going to work forever because it is so toxic.
sure.
As opposed, I mean, on Twitter you have the option of creating your own space, and you know, if somebody, I mean, if somebody is radically political, I just block them. I don't want to hear what they have to say. You know, if somebody is posting crap, I block them. I don't need to know that. And I don't let people like that follow me, and I don't let bots follow me. So, you know, I think that the difference really is, and it's the same on LinkedIn, that you can control what you see, where you can't do that on Facebook. And yeah, groups are fine. I mean, I belong to a Havanese owners group, and you know, Upper East Side dog owners group, and you know, those are helpful to me. But all the other information I need, it's on LinkedIn and Twitter.
Does everyone meet up at the barking dog in that group?
No, we meet in Central Park.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I
Yeah.
used to live over there. Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think these are all great points. I think they're all getting better. They all have a long way to go, but they're all getting better in terms of helping you be more selective about what you see and what you don't, and who you can interact with.
They
Um,
have to.
and they're both
Yeah.
changing their algorithms tremendously. For Twitter was, for a long time, it felt like a fire hose of in your face stuff and you're seeing conversations with random people that you didn't want to see. And Facebook, unwanted content, unwanted ads. And I think that they're both getting a little bit better in terms of like Facebook's trying to prioritize groups in your feed so that you're more seeing things from like-minded people and friends. And Twitter also, I think they're both getting better, but have a long way to go. So yeah, here's, I guess, to close, what's next for you, BL Ochman? What's next for you in marketing? And if you could leave my listeners off with maybe like, what are the top social media trends that marketers should be paying the most attention to right now and in 2022?
Oh, that's a big question. Well, I think that the trend in social media is for every platform to try to be exactly like every other platform. So you have to decide which ones you really want to be on. You can't be on all of them. Don't ignore TikTok. TikTok is great for brands. There's so much that's happening for brands on TikTok, and Instagram is trying to be like TikTok, and so I'd rather be on TikTok than be on Instagram trying to be like TikTok. Again, I think that it's really crucial to post regularly, to interact regularly. I don't think those things are changing, but you must incorporate voice into your social media at this point.
Yes.
I think that, the key thing is to choose carefully and decide who you want to be on these platforms. You can create a persona on these platforms, and you can you can definitely generate business and traffic if you do it the right way. And did I answer all your questions?
Would you say Clubhouse is, you mentioned it before, do you think it's declining in relevance? Because it got bigger over the pandemic, I think for obvious reasons, as did TikTok. But do you think now it's a little bit, seems like it's cooled down a bit?
It's clearly cooled down, and it it has a lot of issues. It has issues with trolls, and it has issues with posers, and it has issues with people who think they're going to get rich there. And there's it has a lot of value, but it's hard to find. They haven't figured out how to make it possible to find the valuable part of it. I think that your options with Twitter Spaces are far greater.
Mhm.
And I think that Twitter Spaces is the one that's going to end up in the first place as it grows. And LinkedIn has just created a creator platform and is hiring people to interact with creators and help creators to bring content to the site. And so you need to watch LinkedIn closely, and you need to also consider voice.
Yeah.
Consider your Alexa, and
Yeah.
how people, I mean, we're you can tell Alexa to play the Beyond Social Media show, and that's a good thing. And you need to consider the tools that these platforms provide. And the only way that you're going to learn about them is if you read their blogs and you follow what they're saying, and you pay close attention to what the trends are, and you only will know that if you're there.
Yeah, and just, yeah, I mean, voice, unlike video or text, we're all so short on time. We have so much competing for our attention. Voice allows you to multitask. You can learn on the go while you're doing other things. And time is, I think, the most fastest disappearing and increasingly valuable resource, right? So
Nobody has enough.
Exactly. And we've had a little on this podcast, and I want to do more episodes actually about voice and AI, because I do think that's going to be maybe the thing that eclipses the internet as we know it eventually. And that's long term, but even in the short term, voice is getting bigger on social, and the rise of podcasts, and people need to understand it to stay relevant.
The other thing that's really super important to learn and keep up with is NFTs and their impact on marketing. And I'm sure you've done shows about that.
Not yet, but that's that's a very important thing to know with investing. And also I'd say even crypto, I think people should be focused because I mean, even if you say, oh, that's like 20 years away, I think a lot of people are gonna
Not,
kick themselves. It's not as far away as you think. And a lot of people I think are gonna regret that they didn't understand it and adapt to the new world we're moving into. Um, so BL, where could people find you? Maybe do you have a class, or how can they get in touch with you? Of course, book.
well, on Twitter, I'm What's Next, and you can find me every week on the Beyond Social Media Show, which is beyondsocialmediashow.com. And I'm on LinkedIn, and I'm on YouTube. I'm pretty much everywhere you might be.
Awesome. Great. Thank you so much, BL. I really appreciate you coming
you.
on, sharing with my listeners, and it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I appreciate it.